student performance here in Bangkok area. Quite interestingly, as far as Bangkok is concerned, they are doing as well as other countries in the region, which was very interesting. But this kind of comparing and contrasting seems to be the things that the policy people in the political want us to discuss and to assist. We did it for higher education. Again, this is work in progress. The bank team, together with us, developed an analytic framework. We applied it to 3 countries in the region: Korea, Malaysia, and Vietnam. And I was speaking about this interim result in Singapore. So this is, again, still work in progress. There are a lot of empty boxes, by the way, because of dearth of data, because of lack of information, etc. But having this exercise, we realize that more and more countries in the region are wanting to compare their system with other countries. What about other agencies? I can introduce many other things, but OECD, some of you may be aware of this initiative, which OECD completed back in 2005, the OECD project called the DESECO project. In a nutshell, what they wanted to do is to try to identify and define and select key set of skills required in the so-called global knowledge economy. They identified 3 areas. One is the skills for interacting in socially heterogeneous group. For example, the ability or capability to work in a very complex organizations like us in UNESCO, where we have many different nationals. How do we communicate with others? We must understand their cultural history, their background, on top of foreign languages, etc. And acting autonomous, this is more about oneself in terms of hammering out his or her vision for life, and then using tools interactively. Another important, most recent initiative about assessment and teaching. So this is, I think, an ongoing initiative by Cisco, Intel, Microsoft, and University of Melbourne in Australia. In a nutshell, again, they are trying to identify the key set of skills, how to operationalize these skills. I'm sure many of you may be aware of this. By the way, Australia and Singapore from this region are participating in this exercise. More importantly, many countries in the region are interested in participating in this international assessment and are participating in the international assessment like PISA by OECD and TIMSS and PIRLS by IEA. So, how countries are doing in the region? Well, as you can see in the graph, as far as the Asia Pacific is concerned, many countries in the region are trying to have their own national assessment. As you can see, for the last 10, 15 years, many countries in the region have introduced a national assessment. How national assessments are different from the public examination, I'm not going into the detail, but as you can see, this national assessment is more from policy purpose. Try to monitor and evaluate their education system. Whereas the public examination, like exit or entrance exam, this is more geared towards individual learners' needs, like to get diploma and certificate. As such, the stake is higher for public examination, especially the college entrance examination, which are implemented in many countries in the region, whereas there's a less risk or stake as far as learners are concerned. But it's important for policymakers to try to evaluate and monitor the learning outcome of their students. This is what national assessment is all about. So we did a quick survey just several weeks ago in Seoul when we had a workshop on assessment and benchmarking. This is the summary. If you have time, please have a look at it. But as you can see, some countries in the region are testing just 2 subjects, but country like Japan, they cover more than 8 subjects. But it varies, but one can get some information, some inspiration from this exercise in different countries. If you want to know more about this exercise, I have brought 2 colleagues of mine are here in this room. So Nini, can you raise your hand? And Mickey, you can ask them for more detailed information. Another important trend from the countries in the region is more and more countries are trying to participate in the international assessment like PISA and TIMSS. As you can see, Australia, Japan, Korea, as a member of OECD country, they have been participating in these exercises. But other countries like Singapore, Philippines, Thailand are participating in this international exercise. Again, trying to see where they stand in terms of learning outcome and their competitiveness. So still another approach is, like for example, in case of Malaysia, the Malaysian government is very keen on knowing where they stand in terms of their system performance. Note that they include this assessment, learning assessment, but not just learning assessment, they want to know where they stand in terms of national curriculum, their teacher education, and so on and so forth. They ask us to team up with their team to assess and evaluate the education system as a whole at the national level. So we'll be doing this within the next 1 or 2 years. So the result of this exercise will be fed into their next planning exercise. So given this, what are the issues that we need to consider? As far as UNESCO is concerned, we have the 3 issues. One is data. Again, I will not go into the detail, but data is a serious concern in many countries. First of all, data collection is the most challenging in many countries in the region. Analyzing the data is still another, and local capacity, etc., is the issue that we need to resolve in one or the other. If we are serious about having a sound system of assessment and benchmarking, national capacity at all levels, at the national level, coordination among different ministries and institutions is a big challenge. And within the National Census Bureau and Statistics Bureau, financial and human resources are key concerns in many countries, etc. So national capacity. And finally, international cooperation. This is one of the reasons why we want to team up with other international agencies like World Bank and IAEA in terms of better support our member states in the region, in terms of coming up with a better data and analysis. So I'm hoping for much more collaboration in the coming months and years with IAEA. Let me stop. Yes. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Back to the questions, even though Mr. Kim might have to leave mid-sentence. I hope that is fine by you. I speak on behalf of my colleagues, I think, Mr. Kim, to say we are delighted to have had a special session at a special UNESCO segment at this conference. We are convinced that our policymakers should care about benchmarking assessment systems, and we are fascinated to study, albeit without a pointer, emerging trends in this region. There was a certain sense of déjà vu in the recapitulation of the 4 pillars of learning. I think it was great that we were reminded that the student or the learner is at the centre, learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to be together, learn together. With that, I would like to thank you so much for giving up your precious time, for being with us, and for presenting another perspective to IAEA on the work of UNESCO and in some of the World Bank work. I would speak to you on behalf of the IAEA membership to say that we would be delighted to collaborate with you in the benchmarking exercise. Could I ask Dr. Prashan to propose a vote of thanks?
On behalf of IPST, the organizer on IAEA 2010, I would like to thank you, Dr. Kwok Cho Kim, Director of UNESCO Bangkok. We learned a lot about education in Asia and Pacific countries. And we hope after your presentation, we will cooperate with any other education study or supporter from UNESCO. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So now there is 10 minutes for questions. If I could ask you to stand, identify yourself and go to the microphone. If it doesn't work, Colin, just yell.
Dr. Kim, thank you very much for a very illuminating address. I found it extremely interesting. I would like to pick up 2 points, if I may. The first one was you had 6 indicators of quality. They were interesting indicators. It included the quality of outcome, but it didn't include the quality of assessment. And I think as an international association for educational assessment, I would wish that there were a 7th quality indicator. We had a keynote address yesterday morning from Professor Bill Boyle of Manchester University, in which he was bemoaning the fact that in much of what we call educational assessment at the moment, the learner is almost absent from the system. I think we must make sure that the learner is repositioned at the center of the assessment process, because it is for the learner that we are conducting the assessments. The second point, and it is linked to that, is the introduction of national assessment. You made the very sensible point that the function of national assessment is to monitor the national education system. And especially in an education for all system, we must be looking at the quality of the education that is being provided. But if this is to be low stakes for pupils, then it must be on the basis of random sampling. The sort of educational assessment, or so-called educational assessment, that we have moved towards in the UK, where all students at a particular age receive exactly the same tests, means that we measure a very, very small part of the curriculum in such massive detail that it really makes no sense in terms of reporting the system. It reports too narrowly on the curriculum. So it really does need to be focused on the whole system. Some 30 years ago, we had quite a useful instrument in the UK called the Assessment of Progress Unit, which was copied in a number of countries. I hope that something like that can be installed in other countries, and that they do not follow the UK slavishly testing every pupil to destruction. Thank you very much.
Just one question, and then Dr. Kwang Jo might like to respond.
I'm Bob from Brunei Darussalam. And first of all, thank you very much for the illuminating presentation. And the disparity in achievement between the haves and the not haves is obvious. And my question is more on policy. So what intervention will UNESCO provide to the poorer nations in order to narrow the gap between the developed nations and the developing nation? Thank you very much.
Will we have time for you to answer both those questions? We'd love it if you could.
First of all, thank you very much for these excellent questions. Let me see if I can your question correctly. The gentleman from UK, I agree that your 2 points. That the first point regarding the quality of assessment, I agree absolutely. I think we may add this dimension, and also putting learners in the center, I think is crucial. After all, what counts is the outcome embodied in each individual learners. So all else is peripheral. So I cannot agree with you more on this. But the next point that you mentioned, having more subjects, more holistic assessment, I agree with you absolutely. And also in terms of in methodology, it would be good if we can have as many as random samples. If we can have, if we can afford randomized experiments, all kind, that would be very ideal. As you said, the UK as a country set the example, many years ago, and many countries are trying to emulate your system. But I spent almost 3 decades in the government of Korea. I discovered that this information data come at expense of some sort. It's not just only budgetary resources, but also it requires human resources as well. So I think, at least from policy perspective, we need to be resource conscious. I think this is one of the reasons why countries are focusing on few subjects, especially if you look at the country like Cambodia have 2 subjects only. I don't know whether there's any tendency between countries, but if you look at Japan and Korea, for example, they are covering more subjects. Ideally, we should cover all the curriculum area, or even the demands required in the labor market, like what PISA does. But in reality, again, I think we need to realize the constraints that we have. So this leads to the second question about the gentleman from Brunei. I think you raised a very pertinent questions with regard to our role. As I said in my previous presentation, UNESCO is not like World Bank and ADB. It's not resource-rich agency. Rather, it's more of intellectual knowledge-based agency. As such, the best we can do is try to broker between these 2 sets of countries, haves and have-nots. And in so doing, the conference like this, we value it very highly because this is the way we can communicate with each other. So information brokering and standard setting and doing some cutting-edge analysis, these are the things that what we can do from UNESCO side. I think it's up to policymakers in respect to member states. Brunei, as a country which is resource-rich, I think if you can determine to set aside more resources for assessment, quality assessment, you may do so. But what we can do is we can provide technical assistance and we can bring in good and better and best practice from around the world. Thank you.